The entire ballroom went silent. Hundreds of wealthy guests watched as billionaire heiress Emily Carter looked at a simply dressed man standing in front of her and laughed. "Do you really think someone like you belongs here?" she said. The man didn't argue. He didn't get angry. He simply looked at her and smiled. Because Emily had no idea. The stranger she had just humiliated in front of everyone was the man who had secretly bought her family's billion-dollar company that very morning. And in just a few minutes, the woman who owned everything was about to discover that she owned nothing. But the biggest surprise wasn't that he had taken her company. It was the reason why he came into her life. Welcome to Heart Nest Stories, where every story carries emotions, unexpected twists, and powerful life lessons. Here, we bring you stories about kindness, success, betrayal, forgiveness, and moments that can completely change someone's life. So sit back, relax, and let this emotional journey begin. Because sometimes, the person we underestimate today can become the person we need tomorrow. Emily Carter had everything most people could only dream about. A luxurious mansion overlooking the city. A private jet waiting whenever she wanted to travel. A wardrobe filled with designer clothes. And a company worth billions of dollars carrying her family's name across the world. At only 28 years old, Emily was known as one of the youngest and most successful businesswomen in the country. Magazines called her a genius. Investors called her unstoppable. People around her called her lucky. But behind the cameras and expensive dresses, there was something Emily slowly began to lose. Something more valuable than money. Humanity. Emily grew up believing that success was the result of power, status, and influence. Her father, Richard Carter, had built Carter Global from a small company into an international empire. When he became sick, he handed the responsibility to Emily. He always told her one thing. "Emily, a company is not built by buildings and money. It is built by people." But after years of living among billionaires and powerful people, Emily started forgetting those words. She began judging people by what they wore, by the cars they drove, by the amount of money in their bank accounts. And that mistake was about to change her entire life. Across the city, far away from Emily's luxurious world, lived a man named Daniel Reed. Daniel was completely different from the people Emily knew. He didn't wear expensive watches. He didn't attend billionaire parties. He didn't have a famous last name. He lived in a small apartment and worked quietly. To most people, Daniel looked like an ordinary man. But what nobody knew was that behind his simple appearance was a brilliant businessman who had spent years building his own success. Daniel had created a technology company from nothing. He had faced failures. He had lost everything once. And he had learned the most important lesson in life. Money can buy comfort, but it cannot buy character. Unlike Emily, Daniel never forgot where he came from. One morning, Daniel received a phone call that would change everything. The voice on the other side said, "Mr. Reed, the acquisition has been completed. Carter Global is officially yours." Daniel looked out of his apartment window silently. For years, he had been watching Carter Global. Not because he wanted revenge. Not because he wanted power. But because he knew something was wrong inside the company. Employees were being ignored. Hardworking people were being treated unfairly. And he wanted to know if the person controlling the company truly cared about the people behind it. That person was Emily Carter. Daniel decided he would not reveal his identity immediately. Instead, he would visit the company and observe everything himself. He wanted to see the truth. Not the version shown in newspapers. Not the version shown on television. The real Emily Carter. That evening was the biggest event of the year. The annual Carter Global Charity Gala. The most powerful people in the city were invited. Business owners, celebrities, investors. Everyone wanted to be seen inside that ballroom. And Emily was the star of the night. She walked into the hall wearing an elegant red gown. Everyone turned to look at her. Cameras flashed. People smiled. She felt like she owned the world. But she didn't know. Someone else in that room already owned hers. Daniel arrived at the party wearing a simple black suit. Nothing expensive. Nothing attention-seeking. He entered quietly and started observing the guests. He noticed something immediately. Employees were standing in corners while wealthy guests enjoyed themselves. Security guards were treated like they were invisible. Waiters were ignored. Daniel remembered his father's words. The way someone treats people who cannot help them tells you who they really are. And that night, he was about to discover exactly who Emily Carter really was. The music inside the grand ballroom became louder as more guests arrived. Crystal chandeliers reflected thousands of lights across the room. People were laughing, taking pictures, and talking about business deals worth millions of dollars. For everyone there, this night was about celebration. But for Daniel Reed, it was about discovering the truth. He stood quietly near the corner of the room, watching everything. He watched how people changed their behavior whenever Emily walked past. Executives smiled even when they were uncomfortable. Employees lowered their heads whenever she looked at them. Everyone was afraid of her. And Daniel noticed something important. Nobody respected Emily. They only feared her. A few minutes later, Emily stepped onto the stage. The entire room became silent. She held a microphone confidently and looked at the crowd. "Tonight is not just about celebrating Carter Global's success," she said. "It's about recognizing those who helped us reach this level." Everyone clapped. But Daniel looked around. He noticed that many ordinary employees who worked day and night were standing at the back of the room. They weren't invited to sit with the important guests. They weren't mentioned. They were invisible. Daniel quietly shook his head, because this was exactly what he wanted to see. The difference between a true leader and someone who only enjoyed power. After her speech, Emily walked around the ballroom greeting important guests. Then her eyes suddenly stopped on Daniel. A man standing alone. A man wearing a simple suit. A man who looked completely out of place among billionaires. Emily frowned. She walked toward him. "Excuse me," she said coldly. Daniel turned around. "Yes." Emily looked him up and down. "Who invited you?" Daniel calmly replied. "I received an invitation." Emily smiled sarcastically. "An invitation?" She looked around. "Do you even know where you are standing?" Daniel remained silent. "This is a Carter Global event. People here are investors, executives, and leaders." She paused. "And you?" She looked at his simple watch and plain shoes. "You don't look like any of those." A few guests nearby started watching. They sensed something interesting was happening. Daniel looked at Emily and said, "Sometimes appearances don't tell the whole story." Emily laughed. "That's something people say when they have nothing else to prove." The people around her smiled. Daniel didn't react. He had seen this kind of attitude before. People who had everything often believed they understood everything. Emily turned toward a security guard. "Can you please check his invitation?" The guard immediately approached Daniel. Daniel showed the invitation. The guard looked at it carefully. Then his expression changed. "Miss Carter." Emily looked at him. "What?" The guard hesitated. "His invitation is valid." For a moment, the room became quiet. But Emily didn't like being questioned. She stepped closer. "Valid doesn't mean he belongs here." Daniel looked at her. "Why do you think I don't belong?" Emily answered without hesitation. "Because this room is filled with people who built something." She pointed around. "Everyone here has earned their place." Then she looked at him. "But you walked in wearing a cheap suit and expecting people to accept you." Those words hit harder than Emily realized. Because she didn't know Daniel's story. She didn't know how many nights he had spent working when nobody believed in him. She didn't know how many times he failed before becoming successful. She only saw what was in front of her. And that was her biggest mistake. One of the investors nearby laughed. "Emily, maybe he just wanted to experience how rich people live." A few people laughed. Daniel remained calm. But inside, he was disappointed. Not because of the insult. Because he finally understood the kind of person controlling Carter Global. Emily walked closer. "Listen, I'm going to give you some advice." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Advice?" "Yes." She smiled. "Don't pretend to be something you're not." The crowd watched. "And don't enter places where you don't belong." At that exact moment, Daniel's phone vibrated. He looked down. A message appeared. "Mr. Reed, the board members are ready. They are waiting for you to announce the acquisition." Daniel looked at the message. Then he looked back at Emily. She was still standing there, believing she had won. But she had no idea. The biggest announcement of her life was only minutes away. Emily turned away from Daniel. "Security, make sure this doesn't happen again." The guard looked uncomfortable. Daniel stopped him. "It's okay." Everyone expected him to leave. But Daniel simply smiled and said, "I'll see you again very soon, Miss Carter." Emily laughed. "I don't think so." Daniel walked away. But nobody knew. He wasn't leaving. He was walking toward the stage. 5 minutes later, the lights in the ballroom suddenly dimmed. The music stopped. Everyone looked toward the stage. The host walked forward. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight." He smiled. "Before we continue, there is a very important announcement." Emily stood among the guests, still confident. She had no idea that the next words would completely destroy everything she believed about herself. The host continued. Today, Carter Global has entered a new chapter. Everyone started whispering. After a successful acquisition, we would like to introduce the new owner of Carter Global. Emily smiled. She expected to see some famous billionaire. Someone from her world. Someone powerful. But then, the doors opened. And the man who walked onto the stage was the same person she had just humiliated. Daniel Reed. The entire ballroom froze. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Every person in the room was looking toward the stage. And standing under the bright lights was the same man Emily Carter had insulted only minutes ago. Daniel Reed. The man she thought didn't belong. The man she wanted security to remove. The man she believed had nothing. But now, he was standing in front of everyone as the new owner of Carter Global. Emily's smile disappeared. Her eyes widened. For the first time that night, she didn't know what to say. She looked around, hoping someone would explain what was happening. But everyone else was just as shocked. The investors who had been laughing earlier were now standing silently. The executives who ignored Daniel before were suddenly nervous. Because they all understood one thing. The balance of power had changed. The host continued. Everyone, please welcome Mr. Daniel Reed, the new chairman and owner of Carter Global. The room filled with applause. But Emily couldn't hear it. Her mind was stuck on one moment. The moment when she looked at Daniel and told him, "People like you don't belong here." Now she realized. He didn't just belong there. He owned the place. Daniel walked toward the microphone calmly. He looked across the room. His eyes stopped on Emily for a few seconds. There was no anger, no revenge, just disappointment. And somehow, that hurt Emily more than anger would have. Because she finally understood that Daniel was not trying to embarrass her. He was simply showing her the truth. "Good evening, everyone," Daniel said. "I know many of you are surprised to see me here tonight." The room remained silent. Especially because earlier today, some people believed I was someone who didn't deserve to stand among them. Everyone looked uncomfortable. Emily lowered her eyes. She knew exactly what he meant. Daniel continued. "But tonight is not about proving who has more money. It's not about showing power. It's about understanding something much more important." He paused. A company is not defined by its buildings, its profits, or its reputation. A company is defined by how it treats people. Many employees standing at the back looked at Daniel. They felt like someone had finally noticed them. For years, they worked silently. They gave everything to Carter Global. But nobody cared. Until now. Daniel turned toward the employees. "I walked through this company before revealing my identity. I saw hardworking people who were ignored. I saw employees who gave their best, but never received respect. And I saw leaders who forgot that success comes from people." Emily felt every word. Because she knew those words were about her. She remembered all the times she walked past employees without saying hello. All the times she judged someone by their appearance. All the times she believed money made someone better. After the speech, Daniel stepped away from the microphone. The crowd began moving again. People approached him. Suddenly, everyone wanted to talk. The same people who ignored him before were now trying to introduce themselves. But Daniel politely refused. He noticed something. Their behavior had changed only because they knew his position, not because they knew his character. Emily stood alone. For the first time in years, she felt small. Not because she lost money. Not because someone defeated her. But because someone had shown her a side of herself she didn't want to see. A few minutes later, Emily finally gathered the courage to approach him. "Daniel." He turned around. She struggled to speak. "I." She stopped. For someone who always had the perfect words, she suddenly had none. "I didn't know who you were." Daniel looked at her. "That's exactly the problem." Emily looked confused. "What do you mean?" Daniel replied. "If you knew who I was, would you have treated me differently?" The question hit her. Because she knew the answer. If Daniel arrived in a luxury car, if he wore an expensive watch, if everyone knew he was a billionaire, she would have smiled. She would have welcomed him. She would have called him important. But because she thought he had nothing, she treated him like he was nothing. Emily quietly said, "I'm sorry." Daniel watched her carefully. "Are you sorry because of what you did?" She looked down. "Or are you sorry because you discovered who I am?" Emily couldn't answer. Because deep down, she knew. She had apologized only after learning his power. Daniel walked away. But before leaving, he stopped. "Emily, your father built this company with a vision. He believed people mattered. Don't let success make you lose the person he trusted." Those words stayed in Emily's mind. Because Daniel wasn't trying to destroy her. He was giving her a chance. A chance to become the person her father wanted her to be. Later that night, Emily returned to her mansion. For the first time, the giant house felt empty. She looked around at everything she owned. The expensive furniture. The luxury decorations. The awards on the walls. Everything she once thought made her valuable. But now she wondered, if all of this disappeared tomorrow, who would I really be? Meanwhile, Daniel sat in his office looking at the documents of Carter Global. His assistant entered. Mr. Reed, what do you want to do about Miss Carter? Daniel looked up. What do you mean? She was disrespectful toward you. Many people would remove her immediately. Daniel stayed silent. Because the truth was, he had every reason to fire Emily. But he wanted to know something first. Could someone who forgot kindness learn it again? Daniel closed the file. Don't remove her. The assistant looked surprised. Why? Daniel replied. Because losing everything is not always the best lesson. Sometimes the biggest punishment is being given a chance to change. But Daniel didn't know. Emily's journey had only just begun. Because the next day, she would discover a secret about Daniel's past. A secret that would change the way she saw him forever. The next morning, Emily Carter woke up earlier than usual. But for the first time in years, she didn't feel like a billionaire. She felt like someone who had made a terrible mistake. She walked through the halls of her mansion, surrounded by everything money could buy. Beautiful paintings, expensive furniture, rare decorations, things that represented her success. But none of them gave her peace. Because one sentence kept repeating in her mind. If you knew who I was, would you have treated me differently? Emily had spent her entire life believing that she understood people. She believed successful people deserved respect. She believed powerful people deserved attention. But yesterday, one person had shown her something painful. She didn't respect people. She respected their status. And that realization was harder to accept than losing her company. At Carter Global headquarters, employees were already talking about Daniel. Everyone had questions. Who was he? Where did he come from? How did he become successful? And why did he choose to buy Carter Global? Many people thought it was just another business deal. But Emily felt there was something more. Daniel wasn't acting like someone who wanted power. He acted like someone who wanted to fix something. Later that day, Emily arrived at the office. For the first time, she didn't walk in like she owned everything. She walked in quietly. Employees noticed the difference. The same people she ignored before were now surprised when she greeted them. Good morning. Those simple words shocked many employees. Because they had never heard them from her. Emily entered her father's old office. The room had remained untouched since Richard Carter became ill. She looked at his desk. On top was an old photograph. A picture of her father standing with employees from years ago. Everyone was smiling. Not because they were rich. Not because they were famous. But because they felt valued. Emily picked up the photo. And suddenly, she remembered something her father told her years ago. Emily, never forget the people who stand beside you when nobody knows your name. At that time, she didn't understand. But now she did. A knock came at the door. Emily turned around. It was Daniel. She immediately stood up. Mr. Reed. Daniel looked around the office. This was your father's office, wasn't it? Emily nodded. Yes. Daniel looked at the photograph. Your father was a good man. Emily looked surprised. You knew my father? Daniel remained quiet for a moment. Then he said, yes, many years ago. Emily became curious. What do you mean? Daniel walked toward the window. When I was young, my family lost everything. Emily listened carefully. My father owned a small business. One mistake, one bad decision, and everything collapsed. People who used to respect him suddenly disappeared. They stopped answering calls. They treated him like he was worthless. Daniel paused. One day my father needed help. He went to many people who had once called themselves his friends. But nobody helped. Emily quietly listened. Nobody except one person. She looked at him. Who? Daniel turned around. Your father. Emily was shocked. My father. Daniel nodded. He didn't ask how much money my father had. He didn't ask what he could gain. He simply helped because someone needed help. Daniel continued. Your father gave my family a second chance. He helped my father rebuild his business. He taught me something important. Emily waited. He said, success means nothing if you forget how it feels to struggle. Emily felt tears forming in her eyes. Because she never knew this side of her father. She only knew him as a billionaire businessman. Not as a person who changed someone's life. Why didn't you tell me this before? Emily asked. Daniel smiled slightly. Because I wanted to know if you were like him. Emily looked down. And Daniel answered honestly. At first, I thought you weren't. Those words hurt. But she knew they were true. Emily took a deep breath. I treated you terribly. Daniel didn't respond. I judged you because of your clothes. I thought I was better than you. Her voice became emotional. I became exactly the kind of person my father warned me not to become. Daniel looked at her. For the first time, he saw genuine regret. Not fear. Not an apology because of his position. Real regret. But before Daniel could answer, his assistant suddenly entered. Mr. Reed, we have a problem. Daniel turned. What happened? The assistant handed him a file. The board members from the previous management are trying to challenge the acquisition. Emily looked concerned. What does that mean? Daniel opened the file. It means someone inside the company doesn't want change. The assistant continued. There is evidence that some executives were hiding financial problems. Emily looked shocked. What? Daniel looked at her. Your company has been losing money for months. She shook her head. That's impossible. The reports showed growth. Daniel replied. Because someone changed the numbers. Suddenly, Emily realized something. Maybe she wasn't the only problem. Maybe while she was busy protecting her image, someone else was damaging everything behind her back. Daniel closed the file. We need to find who is responsible. Emily looked at him. Will you let me help? Daniel studied her face. A few days ago, he would have said no. But now, he saw something different. A person who finally understood. You know this company better than anyone, Daniel said. But if you want to help. He paused. You need to stop acting like the owner. Emily nodded. And become a leader? Daniel smiled. Exactly. For the first time, Emily and Daniel stood on the same side. But neither of them knew. The person who betrayed Carter Global was closer than they imagined. Someone who had been standing beside Emily for years. Someone who knew every secret of the company. The next few days changed everything inside Carter Global. For the first time, Emily wasn't sitting in her office giving orders. She was walking through the company. She was meeting employees. She was listening. And slowly, people started noticing something different. The woman who once ignored them was finally seeing them. Meanwhile, Daniel and Emily investigated the financial records. Every document showed the same thing. Someone inside the company had been secretly moving money. Millions of dollars had disappeared. Someone had created fake reports to hide the losses. Daniel looked at the files carefully. There is only one person who had access to all these documents. Emily looked worried. Who? Daniel turned the screen toward her. The name appeared. Victor Hayes. Victor had been working with the Carter family for 15 years. He was Emily's father's most trusted advisor. He was the person Emily believed she could trust the most. When Emily saw his name, she couldn't believe it. No, Victor can't do this. Daniel looked at her. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who know exactly where to hurt us. They called Victor for a meeting. He entered the office confidently. Emily, what's going on? Daniel placed the documents on the table. Victor looked at them. For a moment, his face changed. But then he smiled. So you found out. Emily stared at him. Why, Victor? He laughed. Why? Because your father built this company, but you destroyed it. Emily looked hurt. I trusted you. Victor stepped closer. You were too busy enjoying the billionaire lifestyle. You never cared about the employees. You never cared about the company. Emily stayed silent. Because some of his words were painful. Because there was some truth in them. She had made mistakes. But betrayal was still betrayal. Victor looked at Daniel. And you? You think you are better? Daniel calmly replied. No. I just learned from my mistakes. Victor became angry. You think money makes you powerful? Daniel shook his head. No. Character does. Victor was removed from the company. But the biggest challenge was still left. Carter Global was damaged. Investors were losing confidence. People were waiting to see if Daniel and Emily could save the company. That night, Emily sat alone in her father's office. She looked at his old photograph. I finally understand what you meant, Dad. Being a leader isn't about people respecting you. It's about making people feel respected. The next morning, Emily made an announcement. She stood in front of all employees. I know I made mistakes. The room became silent. I thought being successful meant being above everyone else. But I was wrong. A company is not built by one person. It is built by every person who gives their time, effort, and heart. The employees looked surprised. Because this was not the same Emily they knew. This was someone who had finally changed. Daniel watched from the back of the room, and for the first time, he smiled, because he realized Emily was becoming the person her father wanted her to be. But then, a message arrived on Daniel's phone. His expression suddenly changed. The message said, "The media has discovered the acquisition. They are questioning your connection with Emily Carter." Daniel looked at Emily, because now their biggest challenge was not inside the company. It was the world outside. The next morning, Carter Global woke up to a storm. News channels were everywhere. Headlines appeared across the internet. Mysterious billionaire Daniel Reed takes over Carter Global. But why? Was Emily Carter forced out of her own company? People started questioning everything. Investors became nervous. Employees became worried. And once again, the company that had survived for decades was facing its biggest crisis. Inside the office, Emily watched the news silently. A few days ago, she would have blamed everyone else. She would have called her lawyers. She would have protected only herself. But this time was different. She looked at Daniel. "What are we going to do?" Daniel remained calm. "We tell the truth." Emily looked surprised. "The truth?" Daniel nodded. "People can forgive mistakes, but they don't forgive lies." They arranged a press conference. Hundreds of reporters gathered outside the Carter Global building. Everyone wanted answers. They wanted to know why Daniel bought the company. They wanted to know what happened between him and Emily. When Emily stepped onto the stage, cameras flashed everywhere. Many expected her to defend herself. Instead, she did something nobody expected. She admitted her mistakes. "I want to be honest with everyone." She took a deep breath. "For a long time, I believed success was about being powerful. I believed people should prove their worth before receiving respect." She looked down. "But I was wrong." The room became quiet. Emily continued. "I judged someone because of the way he looked. I treated a good person like he was nothing. But that person showed me something important. True success is not measured by what you own. It's measured by how you treat people." The reporters looked surprised. Nobody expected a billionaire to admit her mistakes publicly. Then Daniel stepped forward. The cameras turned toward him. "I didn't buy Carter Global to destroy it," Daniel said. "I bought it because I believed it could become something better." He looked at the employees behind the cameras. A company should not only create wealth. It should create opportunities. It should respect every person who helps build it. For the first time in days, people stopped seeing Daniel as a mysterious billionaire. They saw him as someone with a purpose. But then, one reporter stood up. "Mr. Reed, is it true that you humiliated Miss Carter by taking away everything she had?" The room became silent. Everyone waited for Daniel's answer. Daniel looked at Emily. Then he smiled. No, Emily didn't lose everything. She gained something much more valuable. The reporter asked, "What?" Daniel replied, "The chance to become a better person." Those words changed the way people saw them. The story was no longer about a billionaire losing power. It became a story about a person finding herself. Months passed. Carter Global started improving. Employees received better opportunities. The company became stronger. And Emily was no longer the same woman. She started spending time with employees. She listened to their ideas. She treated everyone with respect. One day, Daniel visited the old company cafeteria. He saw Emily sitting with employees, laughing and talking, something that would have been impossible before. She noticed him. "You know, a few months ago, I would never have imagined sitting here." Daniel smiled. "And now?" Emily looked around. "Now I realize I was missing the most important part of success." "What was that?" "The people." Daniel nodded. "Your father would be proud." Emily smiled. "I hope so." But there was still one thing Emily wanted to ask. "Daniel." "Yes." "Why didn't you fire me when you had every reason to?" Daniel thought for a moment. Then he answered, "Because your biggest mistake wasn't that you were a bad person. It was that you forgot who you were." Emily looked at him quietly. "And now?" Daniel smiled. "Now I think you remember." That evening, Emily stood outside the Carter Global building. The same building she once believed represented her power. But now she understood something different. A building could be owned. Money could be earned. Power could be taken away. But respect had to be earned every day. 6 months had passed since the night everything changed. The woman who once believed money was the measure of a person was no longer the same. Emily Carter was still a billionaire. She still owned a powerful company. She still lived in a beautiful house. But now, those things no longer defined her. One morning, Emily visited a small community center that Carter Global had started supporting. She walked inside and saw children studying, families receiving help, and people getting opportunities they never had before. She smiled, because for the first time in her life, she wasn't proud of how much she owned. She was proud of how much she could give. An employee named Sarah approached her. "Miss Carter, I just wanted to say thank you." Emily smiled. "For what?" Sarah replied. "Before, we were just employees to you. But now you know our names. You ask about our families. You actually listen." Emily looked emotional, because those simple words meant more than any award she had ever received. Later that day, Emily went to Daniel's office. She found him looking through company reports. "Busy as always?" Daniel smiled. "Someone has to make sure this company keeps improving." Emily sat down. "I've been thinking." "About what?" "About the first day we met." Daniel smiled. "The day you thought I didn't belong at your party?" Emily laughed softly. "Yes. I still can't believe how wrong I was." Daniel closed the file. "Everyone makes mistakes." Emily shook her head. "But mine was different. I forgot that every person has a story. I saw your clothes, but I never tried to understand your journey." Daniel looked at her. "And now?" Emily smiled. "Now I know that the richest person isn't always the person with the most money. It's the person with the biggest heart." For a moment, both stayed silent, because both of them knew that one embarrassing moment at a party had completely changed two lives. Emily learned humility. Daniel learned that some people can change when they are given a chance. A year later, Carter Global became stronger than ever. But this time, the company's success was different. It wasn't built only on numbers. It was built on trust. Employees felt valued. Customers respected the company. And people remembered Emily not as the billionaire who humiliated someone, but as the leader who learned from her mistake. One evening, Emily visited her father's grave. She placed flowers and stood quietly. "Dad, I finally understand what you were trying to teach me." She looked at the sky. "You weren't trying to teach me how to become rich. You were teaching me how to remain human after becoming successful." Behind her, Daniel stood quietly. He didn't interrupt. After a moment, Emily turned around. "You came." Daniel smiled. "I thought you might need someone to remind you." "Remind me of what?" Daniel replied. "That your father would be proud." Emily smiled with tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Daniel." "For what?" "For showing me the truth." Daniel looked at the city lights. "You know, when I first walked into that party, I expected to find a person who only cared about money. And I did." Emily looked down. "But then I found someone who was willing to change." The story of Emily Carter became famous. Not because she was a billionaire. Not because she owned a powerful company. But because she proved something important. A person can lose their way, but they can always choose a better path. And the biggest lesson was simple. Never judge someone by their clothes. Never decide someone's worth by their appearance. Because the person you ignore today could be the person who changes your life tomorrow. And that was the story of Emily Carter, a woman who had everything the world could offer, but almost lost the one thing that truly mattered, her humanity. Remember, true greatness is not measured by the money in your bank account, the car you drive, or the position you hold. It is measured by the kindness you show when nobody is watching. So before you judge someone by their appearance, remember, every person has a story that you may know nothing about. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs this message, and subscribe to Heart Nest Stories for more emotional and life-changing stories. Because here at Heart Nest Stories, we don't just tell stories, we share lessons that stay with your heart. Thank you for watching, and we'll meet again with another unforgettable story.